More than 2 million people die every year from waterborne diseases. Most of them are children below 5 years of age.
We have millions of people in the United States. Every morning they get up and turn on the tap not knowing that there's rocket fuel in their water supply.
There's really been a concerted effort to mischaracterize the degree of the threat that's facing us.
We have wars going on in the world over oil because of pricing of oil. And if we take the same path with water, that's oil all over again.
The world is running out of fresh water. People will do anything. They'll give anything, their life savings, their house, anything for water.
Without water, we have nothing. Without water, we have no life. We have no culture. We have no society. We have no economy. Without water, the earth wouldn't be what it is.
When you think about our planet, it is one huge living body because of the water that flows through it. And across the land masses, you can have veins of water and arteries of water flowing. This flows into our ocean, which is the heart of our Earth. And it exhales. It evaporates water and puts water back into the hydrologic cycle, which then again goes up to the mountaintops and again comes down in the form of veins and arteries. So our planet is just one huge living body with water constantly circulating through it, and it is the water that gives it life. We too are like the surface of our planet, 70% water and 30% solid. We too have a heart. We have 60,000 miles of veins and arteries. And just like the earth recycles the water, we have a water cycle within us.
The United States does not keep active records of how many people get sick from our water supply every year. There are estimates that from 500,000 to 7 million people get sick per year from drinking the tap water.
One of the problems is that we have lots of bugs in the system. Viruses, pathogens, bacteria. A lot of those things that you think of as stomach viruses or flus, about 40% of those come from your drinking water.
We are not removing things like industrial chemicals, rocket fuel, pesticides, certain pharmaceuticals, drugs that were discharged either by big animal factories or by sewage treatment plants. A lot of people think they don't have to worry about their water supply because they go out and buy bottled water. Well, we have news for them. In fact, a lot of your exposure to many of the chemicals comes from the simple act of showering in them. So some of these more volatile pollutants come in through your skin.
There are over 116,000 human-made chemicals. We have no idea how they interact. We are becoming experiments for these synthetic chemicals. And when the liver takes these chemicals out of our bodies, what happens? They get flushed down the toilet. And then they go into the aquifer. And then they go into our rivers and streams. We take the water from the rivers and streams and we put it into our public water supply systems and we're drinking it again.
All those pharmaceuticals, all those cosmetics, all the stuff that's in there, you know what? It's changing the chemistry in our bodies and it's hurting us.
For the last 30 years since the Green Revolution brought chemical agriculture to India, there are two problems that it has created for water systems. The first problem is the crops are actually highly inefficient in water use. They need lots of water to dissolve the chemicals, and that means 5 to 10 times more water is used to produce the same amount of food.
70% de la consommation mondiale est d'origine agricole, 20% d'origine industrielle, 10% les usagers domestiques. C'est les usages agricoles et industriels qui font qu'on a besoin de plus en plus d'eau pour faire pousser les choses qui ne devraient pas pousser à tel endroit. Et évidemment, pour faire pousser tout ça, il faut aussi des engrais, des produits phytosanitaires, de la chimie. Et évidemment, la chimie avec l'eau et dans les terres, ça fait pas bon ménage. Et aujourd'hui, y compris dans des analyses qui sont rendues non publiques, on s'aperçoit que par exemple l'eau de la Seine, mais on s'est rendu compte que dans les 5 dernières années dans l'eau de Seine, les poissons avaient changé de sexe. Il n'y avait que des femelles, et puis il n'y a plus de mâles. Le problème, c'est qu'on n'a pas de solution, puisqu'on faut toujours boire de l'eau. Hein. Même si vous croyez en Dieu, malheureusement, la pollution, elle est diffuse. Hein.
We mustn't forget that these chemicals were designed for warfare. They are the ultimate weapons of mass destruction. Every one of them came out of the war system. Now they are in our drinking water.
Ça peut paraître exagéré, franchement, ça ne l'est pas. Et tout ça, c'est pas dans 50 ans, dans 100 ans, on est en pleine actualité.
People assume that there's somebody in the government protecting their water supply, and that's often not the case. One of the most extraordinary examples of that is the most common pesticide sprayed in the United States, atrazine.
Atrazine itself is an herbicide, or a weed killer, and it's used on products such as corn. It is the #1 contaminant found in drinking water, and groundwater, and surface water. Initially, we were contracted by Syngenta, the makers of atrazine, and their interest was in trying to understand whether or not, so they said, whether or not atrazine could function as an endocrine disruptor, meaning could it interfere with hormones such as thyroid hormone, testosterone, estrogen. We found that atrazine had a number of effects, but most significantly, atrazine demasculized the exposed male frogs. I would even say chemically castrated. We went on to show that in addition to being demasculized, they were also feminized. So in other words, male amphibians would grow ovaries and even produce eggs. Fish show similar effects. Their sperm counts drop and they start to make egg yolk protein. Does that mean that atrazine is causing a global decline in sperm counts in men? Again, the experimental and the epidemiological data suggest that atrazine may play a very significant role. It's also associated with prostate cancer and some of the factories that produce atrazine, as well as with breast cancer and some studies that look at women whose water is contaminated with atrazine. One big concern might be fetuses that, in effect, are living in water. So if that fetus gets exposed to a chemical, it's constantly drinking its amniotic fluid. In the entire European Union, atrazine has been banned. And in effect, that is the only way you can limit atrazine levels because it can travel up to 600 miles, 1,000 kilometers in the rainwater. In fact, of the 80 million pounds of atrazine we use in the United States, about 500,000 pounds of that atrazine comes back in the rainwater. And the irony is, I guess, that here's a European company selling 80 million pounds of a product in the United States where it's not even legal in the home country.
When the Environmental Protection Agency under the Bush administration decided that it needed to at least appear to do something about the problem after we sued them, they ended up sitting down with the people that made atrazine in private negotiations. They met over 50 times privately with the company, and they cut a deal. No crackdown, no enforcement action, no banning the pesticide.
I've never seen blood like this. They're just pouring this stuff right in. This is going into Lake Titicaca, which is the sacred lake to the indigenous peoples here.
We can see that because that's the part that it's open.
Of course.
But you don't see the whole thing that they are doing to the river
what they're
here.
going to do here is they're going to divert it.
Yeah, and they're
under
just
this
going to
cement.
cover.
They're not going to clean it up. They just, it won't be so ugly and open.
Yeah.
It'll still smell the way it smells.
Y precisamente se tenía que involucrar a la fuerza este río porque hay mal olor porque sale del matadero. La sangre, todo lo que carnean el ganado. Esa agua sucia echan los vecinos. No tenemos alcantarillado en algunas zonas. Entonces esos vecinos a la fuerza tienen que salir a los riachuelos para hacer su necesidad.
So let me understand. Suez said they put an $80 million treatment facility here. Not only did they not do that, but they've diverted the raw sewage into this river that goes into Lake Titicaca.
Yeah, this is a river that crosses all the city. So it's around the city that they are doing the same thing.
Traditionally, water has been delivered as a public service by governments. But in the last 10 years, 3 major water companies from Europe have started delivering water on a for-profit basis in many parts of the world. They are very powerful. They're all among the top 100 corporations, Fortune 500 companies. They're very wealthy. They're growing very fast. And basically, developing countries, poor countries, are being forced all over the world to hand over basic control of their water systems to a for-profit multinational from Europe or far away.
Suez is one of the 2 world leaders in the water distribution, water treatment in the world.
I'm working with a French company, a large water operator called Vivendi Environment.
We are active in more than 100 different countries.
We are active since 150 years. So we are a very long-term operator in water business.
Esa agua es el agua de Limani, pero el agua de aquí está contaminada. Ahorita está saliendo limpio, hace rato han visto que estaba negro el agua. Ahora, un poco más tarde, el agua ya viene con gusanos. Así, jugando en la calle, vienen aquí, se reciben y toman esa agua. Entonces, esa agua les hace daño.
El objetivo de la privatización fue el de dotar del servicio de agua potable y alcantarillado en las ciudades de La Paz y El Alto. Pero, durante todo este proceso, evidenciamos que solamente en la ciudad del Alto quedan excluidos 208,000 personas del servicio de agua potable.
No tenemos ni agua, ni luz. Ahí está, con esta polvadera se nos ensucia la ropa más. Y hasta nos trata de que somos tan sucios. No es porque uno quiere, sino que porque no hay agua.
Gente humilde, ¿no? Algunos apenas se hacen alcanzar para consumo. Y si vamos a hacer privatizar, la gente de dónde va a traer dinero.
Nosotros hemos dicho que Aguas del Illimani se tiene que ir. Vecinos no tienen agua, no tienen alcantarillado.
Como ustedes posiblemente se han enterado mediante la prensa en sus países, nosotros aquí en Bolivia estamos llegando a sufrir.
Pueden comprarle a nuestro dirigente, pero no nos van a comprar a todos.
This is a country in which nearly 1 out of every 10 children will die before the age of 5. And most of those deaths are related to illnesses that come from a lack of clean drinking water. So when people of El Alto say enough with water privatization, it's because if they don't have access to clean drinking water, their children's health is at risk. Why did Bolivia privatize the water systems of Cochabamba and El Alto? It's not like Bolivian citizens decided it was a good idea. Water privatization was absolutely forced on Bolivia by the World Bank. In 1997, the World Bank told Bolivia that if they did not privatize the water system of Cochabamba and El Alto La Paz, that they were going to be cut off from water development loans by the World Bank.
Yo creo que esa es la privatización para nosotros una lucha contra la muerte, ¿no? la lucha por la vida, porque la vida siga siendo una vida donde nuestros hijos, nuestros nietos, nosotros podamos disfrutarla, ¿no? Es una lucha entre una vida digna, una vida con alegría, o una vida con sometimiento, una vida con amargura, con angustia, con inseguridad, que no es vida.
Ngo-2000 ngoSeptemba mhla 19 wagula waphathwa yisisu. Shuthi wagula nje 3 days. Shuthi kwakwenziwa amanzi siwasebenzisayo. Amanzi nje angahlanzekile sasiwakha emfuleni. Kushuthi nje ngingabe ukuthi njengoba ngimdala la ekhaya ngizizwa ngumuntu ogqilazeke kakhulu. Abafundayo engazi ukuthi ngabafundisa ngani kanjani ngabondla ngani kanjani.
Akukho ukusithembisa okungcono ngoba nakho lokho okuzayo okwemali vele okuphoqa ukuthi imali uma ungenayo ugcina futhi ubuyelile khona emfuleni. Phindela khona lapho emfuleni ungcolile. Bake bafika basitshela ukuthi funa mangabe sibuye kowakha siwenze njani. Kokungabe ezempilo. Shuthi akwenele ngoba manje ngishunga wakha nakho vele lokho abathi asikusebenzise kuyimali. Imali mayingekho akho into ongayenza. Kuyikho ukuthi vese phuze wona enjengoba enjalo. Esisuke sisaba kodwa uma amanzi engekho ayikho into ongayenza. Yikho kuvela uphuze khona lokho noma ukwazi thina.
We have waiting here 5 hours. Sometimes that water comes, sometimes they don't come. Sometimes we can spend 4 weeks without water. Yeah, every day we can come and open. Nothing, there's nothing.
Cost recovery is kind of the new Bible, you know, that we have in South Africa, that everybody must pay for whatever service you get. And for rich people, that's obviously not a problem. But when it comes to the really poor, you wouldn't believe it, but 5 rand, which is less than $1, is a lot of money for rural communities. So you find that the poorest of the poor, they're only taking 1 bucket, but if you work out how much they paid for that bucket, it's actually more than a richer person would have paid in an urban community for that water, and it's unjust.
If you have no water, forget about reducing poverty, because bad water is today the source of the major diseases. It kills more than AIDS, more than wars. We are all committed to reduce by half the proportion of people with no access to clean water. The challenge is of such a magnitude. We must put at the disposal of the common good the know-how of the private sector.
Par mois. En fait, on les paye par mètre de réseau installé.
We are from Suez.
Oh, this is from Suez. That's interesting. At first, when these private companies went into developing countries, they were welcomed by the people because they were going to bring water and they were going to bring investments. Of course, what people didn't understand was that they're not bringing new investments. It's paid for by the public purse and by the World Bank. Then they came in and they raised prices and they didn't deliver good quality water and they cut poor people off and they fired public servants and their record was a disaster.
They are bringing water to poor areas, but they're bringing the water where you have to put in a little card to get that water.
This country is perhaps the leaders in a new technology, prepayment
water metering?
Yeah, actually, this is the book that we got that is showing people how to use the prepaid meter. But the fact is that this book is written in English, and then half of this community, they don't understand English.
The consumer needs to pay upfront for the supply of water.
You have to have this token to pay for water. If I want to have water, I have to put my bucket here. You see? That's how I get water.
You've actually got to change the thinking, the culture of people to understand that they should pay. You shouldn't have to force them to pay. They should want to pay.
By telling a woman who's got nothing, in order to get your water, you must put in a card that takes your meager amount of money. What is she going to do but go to the river and take that dirty water and die of cholera? And then you say people don't know how to practice hygiene.
The people here don't know. We just asked them. They don't know that they're getting prepaid water meters.
They don't have a choice. These people are poor. They don't have a choice. They're not being educated about the implications of the whole process.
They don't even know they're having
because you don't give them a choice.
It's impossible. You're insulting me. So we are going. People are to pay regarding what they consume.
When you know that,
The placards of the post-liberation period said, free water, free electricity, houses for all. What was actually happening was that many people were having their electricity disconnected, their water disconnected, and were being evicted from these very homes that the government said they would improve conditions on. People then started saying, we will reconnect illegally, but we will reconnect openly. There are whole townships that are reconnecting people's water.
There are women plumbers here. We learn the job from the men because when the men are not here, we are the ladies who reconnect the water and reconnect the lights.
The water has been stopped and we just battle and, try and get water from containers and things like that.
They talk about water in school and water is precious. Very precious.
And water is so important, We really need to use water all the time. So we don't know.
When you hear people saying the water for the people, we have no problem. Water should not be a commodity, we have no problem. We are just the operator, like an hotel operator, who operate the system because we have a very long-term experience. We sell our knowledge.
We have a know-how, we have the technology. We know how to organize very big networks, bringing water to the homes. Today, more than 30,000 people are dying every day from water disease. The ideal objective would be to bring clean water to everyone.
C'est des sociétés qui ont été créées il y a 150 ans, par des banquiers. C'est ça qui est important de savoir. Ce n'est pas des sociétés philanthropiques, ces multinationales. Donc, le message aussi altermondialiste de ces multinationales est un langage vraiment scandaleux, parce que quand ils disent « c'est nous qui allons régler la misère du monde en matière d'accessibilité à l'eau », mais comment des actionnaires de Veolia peuvent attendre quelques 10 ou 15 ans pour qu'on amène de l'eau à des gens qui ne peuvent pas la payer? Ça ne les intéresse pas.
You cannot deliver the same amount of good quality water or healthcare or education or anything else to a population that needs it if you're also providing profit for your investors. It's just basic common sense.
People have the view that water is provided free from the heavens, from God. So why must you pay for water? But if you're going to receive water in a sustained way through pipes and taps, that there's a lot of money that has to go into that provision.
We are quite sympathetic to the fact that you have to run this city and you need money. But are you going to try and get this money out of people who cannot pay you at all?
one of the UN resolutions, the Millennium Goals, they want to reduce the number of people, the percentage of people without access to drinking water by half by the year 2015. But if you continue to provide drinking water using conventional methods, using centralized treated water piped to various locations, the cost becomes unaffordable because most of these rural people live in small settlements dispersed widely. So one must think of ways to do it outside the box, as the saying goes. Almost everybody in India has an experience with biologically contaminated water. In my case, I lost 5 of my cousins to diarrheal disease while I was growing up. I was just a child. It's only when I grew up and I had my own children that I had some appreciation of what a disaster it must have been for my aunts and uncles. The fact that ultraviolet light kills pathogens or bacteria in water has been known since 1920s. I came up with the idea to disinfect water with UV light in a way that is affordable because nobody else was doing it. It's something that should have been done and could have been done by many, many people much, much earlier, but it just wasn't. In this state of Andhra Pradesh, last year, 70,000 people died from dirty drinking water, despite official claims that, it's available within, 2 kilometers of walking distance. Tens of thousands of people in every state of India lose their lives to dirty drinking water.
ఈ వాటర్ హెల్త్ రాకముందు మేము ఈ బావిలో నీళ్లు చెరువులో నీళ్లు తీసుకొని తాగేవాళ్ళము. అవి త్రాగినప్పుడు మాకు చాలా డిసీజ్ కలరా అవి ఇవన్నీ వచ్చాయి.
The daily operation of the system can be taken care of by the local community. The price at which they buy the water from themselves provides enough revenue to employ the person who actually maintains the system, who's a local person. So it becomes a financially viable, self-sustaining model of how a community can pay for safe drinking water for people who have never had safe drinking water in their whole life.
ఈ రాకముందు చాలా ఇది చేసాం. తర్వాత ఇప్పుడు మేము ఇంటికి ఉత్తరాలు ఇస్తాకి వెళ్తాం కదా, ప్రతి ఒక్కరు అప్పటికంటే ఈ వాటర్ తాగి నాకు హెల్త్ బాగుంటుంది.
రిజల్ట్ వచ్చేసరికి ఆటోమేటిక్గా మనుషులకు ఉపయోగపడి మనుషులు అంత ఆరోగ్యకరంగా ఉన్నప్పుడు మనకంటే ఇంకా తక్కువ జీవరాశులు, తక్కువ బ్రాండ్లు, అప్పుడు నూతు వాటర్ వాడేటప్పుడు మెడిసిన్స్ వాడి ఆ మెడిసిన్స్ వాడినా మనకి అప్పుడు ఒక్కొక్క కోడికి వచ్చి ₹2 మెడిసిన్స్ వాడాలి. ఈ వాటర్ వల్ల వచ్చే డిసీజులు రాకుండా ఉన్నాయి అని చెప్పి మనకి పక్క.
The cost per person per year for having 10 liters of safe drinking water every day is just $2 per person per year. Even for people who make less than $1 a day, they can afford $2 per year. The number of people who actually benefit every day from this technology is about 300,000. In proportion to the number of people who need it, is really minuscule. We have a huge amount of distance to go. Historically, most of the funding provided by aid institutions has gone to poor countries but provided water only to the politically powerful and economically powerful sectors in those countries. Once they get their safe drinking water, their passion for providing safe drinking water for the rest of the country declines substantially. Essentially is that they have got what they wanted and the rest can live in slums and drink the water that they can get.
For the longest time, people have taken water for granted. Most people don't think about where their water comes from. They just turn on the tap and they expect it to be there. Those days are ending.
This notion that we'll have water forever is wrong. California's running out. It's got 20-some years of water. New Mexico's got 10, although they're building golf courses as fast as they can, so maybe they can whittle that down to 5. Arizona, Florida, even the Great Lakes now, there's huge new demand.
The Nile River doesn't reach its end. The Colorado River, the Yellow River in China, they, for the most part, don't flow anymore to the sea.
So this notion that somehow these problems are far away, get rid of that. You know, take it out of your head, you know, delete that.
We're treating the water resources of the planet with contempt, which is just so stupid because we depend on them. We need water to live. We'll only survive for a day or two if we don't have water.
Scientists, through decades of study and millions of pieces of data, now recognize the fact that we're on the brink of the 6th great mass extinction ever to be experienced on the face of Earth. The 5th mass extinction was the dinosaur age.
You know those movies where there's the comet coming at the Earth and all of a sudden the governments of the world say, gee, our differences aren't so big anymore because we're about to all die? That's really where we are. There is a comet coming at us. It's called water shortage.
Climate change is a real problem. Humans are changing the climate. We already see evidence about it. One of the most significant impacts of climate change will be on our water resources.
We're going to see a lot of people are going to die because of the floods and droughts and various social upheavals that are caused by global warming. What's also tragic is that there's a lot of awareness of that now, but so much of that awareness is then being used by corporate interests. Oh, we're running out of water and we need to invest so much money in water and it's so terrible how water is managed, and then somehow they make the flip to, oh, we must privatize it so then we'll use it more efficiently and everybody will be better off, which is total nonsense, total utter nonsense. I mean, it's mainly these people have an interest clearly in making money out of selling water to people.
There are private corporate interests that have decided that water is going to be put on the open market for sale. It's going to be commodified and treated as any other saleable good.
Water is now a $400 billion global industry, the 3rd largest behind electricity and oil.
I bought the green, I have the blue, and I have about half of the yellow.
The market is amoral, and it's going to lead you to taking advantage of pollution and scarcity, frankly. It's going to lead you to selling to those who can buy it and not to those who need it.
The water sector is going to grow at 2 to 3 times the global economy over the next 20 years. By buying the companies that source, treat, distribute, and monitor our water supply, you're likely to have a pretty strong investment over the next decade or so.
People say that, well, water's a lot like air. Do you charge for air? Of course not. You shouldn't charge for water. Well, okay, watch what happens.
Bottled water is used by millions of people around the world because they think it's safer than tap water. There is less than one person, according to the Food and Drug Administration, regulating the entire multi-billion-dollar bottled water industry in the United States. That means that that poor person does multiple things and one of them is water. The Food and Drug Administration, if you ask them what's in any brand of bottled water, they'll say, we have no idea.
So stupid. Why would people pay such a premium for bottled water? To find out, we took over a very trendy California restaurant. We printed our own elegant water menus with phony imported waters, costing as much as $7 per bottle. Our water steward gives our first lucky couple our special water list.
I guess we'll get Le Doux Robinet.
The Le Doux Robinet?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Okay.
It's French for tap water.
Cheers. Okay. Yeah, it's clean.
It has a flavor to it.
How would you compare it to tap water?
Oh, yeah, definitely better than tap water.
What was the actual source of these chic waters? A garden hose on the restaurant patio.
3 out of 4 Americans drink bottled water, and 1 in 5 will only drink bottled water.
And water is something we already pay for.
Leading brands are basically tap water.
often sold for more than the cost of gasoline.
So today we're here at Tufts University organizing our 42nd Tap Water Challenge.
I thought for sure that the Dasani water was tap water.
They're spending tens of millions of dollars every year to convince us that bottled water is better than tap water, when in fact it's much less regulated.
We tested over 1,000 bottles of water, over 100 brands that are sold in the United States, and we found that it is not necessarily any safer or better or purer than your city tap water. We found some of them had arsenic in them at high levels, some of them had organic chemicals in them, a variety of bacteria. So there were problems with about a third of the brands that we sampled. Some of the water we saw that had pictures of mountains on it, it was city tap water. Glacier water came from groundwater in Florida. Some of them said that they were pure mountain. I mean, the list is very long. We found a case in Massachusetts where a guy had sunk a well in an industrial parking lot that was near a Superfund site. He was pumping water out of this well and selling it under multiple different brands. So people buying this stuff had no idea where it was coming from.
The dream of pure water for all is within reach for the humankind.
The World Water Council was created at a meeting of big, powerful water interests in 1997. They came together to promote corporate takeover of water. They will not tell you that. They'll say they came together to bring water to the world's people. But if you look at who is at that founding meeting, it's all the big water corporations, it's the World Bank, it's a lot of the international development agencies. And so they came together to promote a vision of a water future that's based on water as a market good.
Most Americans have no idea what the World Bank actually is. Do you agree with that?
Unfortunately, I do. And it's sad because we deal with the question of governance, the question of corruption, questions of environment, questions of health, questions of education, and ultimately those things are at the core of peace.
How can you keep loaning poor countries money to meet their basic needs? It is completely predictable that what happens is poor countries end up with debts they can't afford, and that debt becomes the noose around their neck with which the World Bank and the IMF become the government.
There is a political set of questions to be asked around this. Who owns water? Who gets to make the decisions about water? Why is this group, the World Water Council and the World Bank and these big water corporations, why have they got to set themselves up as a global high command of water and make decisions for the rest of us? Who exactly elected them?
Quand le président du Conseil mondial de l'eau, qui organise tous les grands forums à la gloire des multinationales, n'est autre que le président d'une société à Marseille qui appartient à 50% à Vivendi, 50% à Suez. Et quand vous savez que Michel Canne-Dessus, qui est l'ancien président du FMI, et qui a comme ses deux conseillers principaux les deux numéros 2 de Suez et de Veolia, on a compris, tout est contrôlé, vicié. Simplement, les gens ne le savent pas.
And this is a club that decided, I think before the rest of us understood, that water is the most precious commodity for them in the world. It's blue gold. They're going to make tons of money, and more importantly than money, because you really need to compare fresh water with oil. It's about power. It's about which sectors of society, which countries, which governments, which corporations are going to control the blue gold of the future.
Water is for survival, and who owns the water for survival owns you. And that's the picture that people have to understand.
Have you ever seen any of your victims?
Victims? Be melodramatic.
Look down there. Would you really feel any pity if one of those dots stopped moving forever? If I offered you 20,000 pounds for every dot that stopped, would you really, old man, tell me to keep my money? Or would you calculate how many dots you could afford to spend? Free of income tax, old man. Free of income tax. The only way you can save money nowadays.
The Ganges is quite clearly a mother in a deep sense in the Indian cultural heritage. We bring the ashes of our people to this river when they die. Until those ashes touch the river, their spirits and souls are not considered to have had salvation. When a child is born, we put a drop of Ganges water in their mouth. When someone dies, the last rite is a drop of Ganges water. It is considered purifying in a very deep spiritual sense, that it cleanses you and is the place where humans return to become more human. It's a river that gives us our humanity. Its very life is under threat, and with the life of the Ganga, what is threatened is the belief of 1 billion Indians. This water's flow is being interrupted. This Ganga is being trapped in the Tehri Dam, and the tragedy of it is that it's being done for the most base, crude greed of one of the world's biggest water companies. Suez is then going to get the water, 635 million liters a day, to be sold to Delhi citizens at 10 times the price they are paying for water today.
In the 1800s and the 1700s, and going back even further in time, society lived on the resources that we had. We took water when we needed it from the rivers for irrigating small-scale agriculture. We captured rainfall and recharged our groundwater aquifers when we could. That traditional way of meeting our water needs was replaced in the 20th century by the idea that we could build large infrastructure. We could build big dams, we could move rivers around.
We're building dams basically to store water. Why do we store water? We store water so then it can be supplied for cities for drinking water, or to agriculture for irrigation, and so that we can generate hydroelectricity. But the big issue is, do we really need dams to do these things, and are there other better ways in which we can store water?
When we dam a river or change the course of a river or straighten a river, we are playing with a very powerful thing, and we are altering ecosystems in a very short period of time that took thousands or millions of years to adapt and to evolve. In the river, we have organic matter that would flow down the river and feed all the life forms in the river and all of the life forms along the river and feed our oceans. When you put up a dam, that organic matter gets captured behind the dam, and it begins to rot, and it creates methane gas. And methane gas is one of the gases that contributes to the greenhouse effect on our planet.
When you calculate the global warming impact of the reservoir, it can be many times worse even than a coal plant. Sometimes 20 times higher than a coal-burning power plant. Invariably, when a dam is being built, you hear justification for the dam based on it's going to provide water for the poor, it's going to provide water for these drought-prone areas which are so badly in need of water, and you get this feeling that this is some great development project to help the lives of the small farmers and the poor people in whatever country we're talking about. Actual experience shows that this doesn't happen, that those who are able to benefit from the increased irrigation water invariably are the larger farmers.
ke tswa gona mo dikeng ko mo maitsisa ha ke tlebe ke tle mona ha matara mme le kwa ntho ne ke fitela tlatswa ke ntho ya bontata gona ke go ntho telele kwana gale o tlosa go phela o tloa gale yo di sta go e hlalosa gona ke botelele bo bokae ke le gatamelwa ke batho bana ba bolela ke batho ba gongweng ke mookamedi wa morero le bo mmusi wa street ke bona ba gatamela ba bolela gore ntho ne metsi ihlaba ke ntho e saenetsweng mme le ha ba gona re sa batle go tloa mono ke ntho e saenetsweng fatshe re tlameha go tloa kankane
ntho ke hlolelang ho feta ko go bane mona ke phela ka thata jwale ha bana ba ka ba lapile ke a hloga ke hlogela hae
no itse go tla phamiswa mpa ke ntsha go phamiswa e hlile bo titibetse re tshaha go sana go re reng re lapile
ke ba kwatetse fela ga ona thuso bane re ile ga etsetswa dipitso tse ho thweng ha baneneng ke molao o tlamang gore re tloe mono
Worldwide, the most shocking impact of large dams is the displacement of communities. According to the World Commission on Dams, somewhere between 40 to 80 million people were displaced by large dams in the 20th century. We're talking tens of millions of people. We're talking the population of a large European country. This is really a huge number of people. The problem is that promises are made all the time to the affected people to encourage people to move. We'll give you a nice new house, we'll give you clean water, we'll give you electricity, but nobody is actually accountable for these promises to be fulfilled. Promises are made, people are moved, the project is built, and then a year later people still don't have their land. There's nothing for them to do. They have no legal recourse in most cases to hold anyone accountable.
So in the name of development, these communities in the river valleys face destruction, destitution, deprivation, because the thickly populated communities with the best of agriculture, horticulture, temples, mosques, cultural monuments, everything is to go underwater.
Impa ba yang dibakeng tsena le marena ba ise mareneng mme ke dumela hantle gore le ba bang mantse ba setse ba ba holo ba gale kwana ba ntse ba kwaletswe ke letamo
The World Bank has been the single biggest funder of big dams around the world since it was set up in the 1940s. One reason the World Bank really likes big dams is big dams are really expensive. The World Bank has to lend about $20 billion a year. If it can't do that, then it makes less profit. So what's the easiest way to boost up its lending is lend for these huge projects. In all the countries where it operates, the World Bank has legal immunity, so nobody can take the World Bank to court. So the World Bank finances a project which destroys your livelihood, your home, floods your land, ruins your life. You can't sue the World Bank for that.
The World Bank knows how to spend $1 billion in one place. They don't know how to spend $1,000 in 1 million places, to spend that same $1 billion at 1 million different villages. And yet in many places what we need is not $1 billion answer, it's $1,000 answer.
Centuries ago, buildings would be built with tanks in the basement and water would fall on the roof and then be rooted down to the basement and stored there. And people are now realizing, yeah, that was an incredibly good idea. Why do we spend billions of dollars building some huge dam 100 miles away? Why don't we just trap the rainwater that actually falls on the house?
My name is Rajendra Singh. This is a Gopalpura village, and I start the work here in October '84. In the beginning, I start some school and a small clinic. But after 6 months, Mr. Mangu Meena says, we not need education, we need water. I am not an engineer. I don't know about the water. You see that hill before the whole topography like this. The water is very less rainfall here. So what we can do? Mangu says, I can teach you. We have a very great wisdom of water conservation and water harvesting in my country. So we revive this wisdom, the wisdom of the water conservation of my country. Before this, lot of problem here, and well is completely dry, no water here. So this hill and that hill we can join with this water harvesting structure, and all water come that side. So all collect here and recharge underground aquifers. And water go on the wells, and they are using for agriculture and for drinking. You can see the visual impact. Downstream greenery and grasses and tree and vegetation come up with the moisture. If the moisture come up, the greenery come up, and greenery come up, the prosperity come up. So this is the link with the water, underground aquifer, and surface. Due to this water conservation, our farmers are taking good 2-3 crops. So now the much grains is coming. Now we are giving the grain to the cities. We are giving to the vegetable to the cities. Now the city people coming in my village for the employment. Now more than 7,600 water harvesting structure we construct with the community force, with the community mobilization, with the community strength. Green forest in desert of Rajasthan. When we start this water harvesting structure, they give the notice to me, a legal notice. Under the Irrigation Drainage Act 54, they are saying, you catch the rains here. This rains is not yours. Who is this water? I ask the question. Who is this water? Yours? Government's? No. Water is a natural resource. Water is a common resource. Water is not a property. Water is a resource for the life.
At the point that I learned about Nestlé's intention of establishing a bottling plant here in Michigan, I thought, Nestlé here in the heart of our state, bottling water, this is a big one. They're pumping upwards of 450 gallons per minute. And what that means in ecological terms is that streams are lowering, that what used to be bodies of water are turning into mud flats, lake levels are dropping in the vicinity of this pumping site. Adding insult to injury is the fact that Nestlé Corporation doesn't pay 1 cent for the water that they extract. And they're making, it's speculated, upwards of $1.8 million a day in profits off of that water, which belongs to all of us.
So here we are in Michigan. You got a company that wants to pump water out of a stream system, all right? It doesn't own the water. It has a right to use the water like other landowners. So the question is, does their right to use mean they have a right to put it in a bottle and claim ownership and sell it? That was the basic question.
We asked for a moratorium and said, give the people more time to research this, to find out, is this what the community wants? And the township officials basically said, we know what's best.
When citizens hear about a project, you can be sure the company's been there for at least a year already. They've talked with everybody they need to talk to. They've been given the green light informally.
Nestlé Corporation received $10 million in tax abatements over 10 years. So not only are they not paying for the water itself, but they're not even contributing to the local tax base of that community.
And the DNR leased that property to them for 99 years for $63,000. Nothing.
And you see these semi-trucks traveling in one right after the other to pick up this water, which has been pumped from the ground, has traveled through 12 miles of stainless steel pipe. They've treated it with chemicals. They've put it in plastic bottles, which are a non-renewable resource. They're polluting our watersheds the moment you've consumed the water.
And I'm sure a lot of it will end up right back up here because they sell Ice Mountain in the area. So it's ludicrous. They make scads of money giving our water back to us.
They're being sued in 5 states. In Zephyr Hills, they took so much water that there are huge sinkholes where the land is sinking. And I live on a farm, and I don't want my little stream to disappear, and they want to put more wells up in Everett.
My wife's sister, when they was doing her testing last year, she ran out of water at that time when they were doing her 7-day test and 4-day test.
And my neighbor next to me is almost out of water, and all of this started after they started testing their wells.
We're fighting this battle, this David and Goliath battle.
We are having to have garage sales and bake sales and concerts and all kinds of little fundraisers.
Court is now in session. The Honorable Lawrence C. Root presides. You may be seated.
The UN is saying in their reports, by the year 2020, we're going to have half the world's population without adequate water. By God, they're coming after Michigan's water.
When Nestle came into Michigan, they said, we're a good corporate citizen, we're not going to hurt anything, we're responsible. During the trial, the company kept pumping during a season of drought.
Any of the predicted reductions in flow in dead stream will have absolutely no effect on that ecosystem.
The stream area in front of one of the clients' homes was basically a mud flat. I cross-examined the plant manager, and I said, look at these pictures, there's a mud flat here. Don't you think you ought to stop pumping? They kept pumping even then. Some of these small channels that flow into the lake from these springs along the North Shore almost stopped flowing. The reality was, no matter what they said, there was significant adverse impact, and they kept pumping.
We had a petition drive, and a couple of weeks later, citizens are calling me and saying, someone knocked on my door, and it was a private investigator.
They even hired a firm that came around and went to people's doors, knocked on their door and said, did you sign a petition? And confronted these older folks.
What we did was we said, let's go back in time and look at who owned the water 1,000 years ago in Rome. And how has the civil law in Europe and in other cultures handled this question of water ownership and use? And what we found was that water has always had a public aspect to it. This water has always been considered not owned by anybody. I mean, you know, today we think, well, isn't that profound? It's not profound at all. I mean, that's just common sense. You look at the sun. Do you own the sun? Water is this transient gift on earth for life, moving and flowing. And inherent in its transient nature is the idea of commons, things that are not transient, you know, like this pen, okay? You can pick up and own. Things that are transient, you don't own. The judge ruled, he simply said, look, a diversion of water for selling somewhere else that diminishes the flow or lake, the integrity of this flow of water is unlawful. It cannot be done. They do not have the property right to do it, and he told them to turn off the pumps.
This is what happened, you know. This is 1854. The American Indian chief of Seattle replies to an offer from the white government of the United States to buy, within quotation, to buy a large area of Indian land. How can you buy or sell the sky, the warmth of the land? The idea is strange to us. If you do not own the freshness of the air and the sparkle of the water, how can you buy them? You don't own them. Every part of this earth is sacred to my people. Every shining pine needle, every sandy shore, every mist in the dark woods, every humming insect is holy in the memory and experience of my people. This beautiful earth is the mother of the red man. We are part of the earth and it is part of us. The rivers are our brothers. We give the rivers the kindness we would give to any brother. But the white man does not understand our ways. He is a stranger who takes from the land whatever he needs. The earth is not his brother but his enemy, and when he has conquered it, he moves on. He kidnaps the earth from his children and he does not care. I do not know. Our ways are different from your ways.
When I first came to Plachimada last year, my sisters were sitting alone, having persisted for a year to tell Coke to go home.
What's happening here is that these women from all generations are being put off the land by Coca Cola, which is across the road stealing their water, bottling their water, poisoning their land. Their wells are running dry, their food isn't good anymore, the water's impossible to bathe in. So these people have been in a sit-in like this for almost 2 years now. Every single day, they quietly, with great dignity, come here and speak their truth to that power across the road.
Nobody in this country, especially the poor, have the luxury to sit at a time when they could be working to make a living. And I know that if our sisters and brothers are sitting here day in and day out, it is with a reason.
ഈ കമ്പനി വരാത്ത മുമ്പ് ഞങ്ങളുടെ ജീവിതങ്ങൾ വളരെ സുന്ദരമായി ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. നല്ല വെള്ളങ്ങളുണ്ടായിരുന്നു, നല്ല പണി ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് പാടത്ത് പണിക്കല്ലേ പോകണം, പണികളൊക്കെ നല്ല പണി കിട്ടിയിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ഈ കമ്പനി വന്ന ശേഷം തന്നെ കമ്പനി വന്ന് ഒരു 6 മാസം ആകുമ്പോഴേക്ക് വെള്ളത്തിൻ്റെ ടേസ്റ്റുകളൊക്കെ മാറിപ്പോയി. കുളിച്ചാലും തല ചുറ്റൽ, ആ കൈയും കാലൊക്കെ ഒരു വേദനയും കുടച്ചിലും ഉണ്ട്.
We come here as guests to be with our brothers and sisters who have been struggling. And the media will then report Coca Cola refused to let the people of Plachimada in. You know, that's exactly what we are questioning about you as a company.
That is a subject I am not supposed to debate.
ഇങ്ങനെ
പട്ടിയൊക്കെ ചത്തമാതിരി ഒരു നല്ല വൃത്തിയായിട്ട ചൂര് വരുന്നുണ്ട്. ഇപ്പം അങ്ങനെയല്ല. സമരം തുടങ്ങിയപ്പോൾ രാത്രി സമയത്തെ വാട്ടർ ടാങ്ക് തുറക്കണുള്ളൂ. അപ്പോൾ രാത്രി 12 മണിക്ക് ശേഷമൊക്കെ അത് വാരിക്കൊണ്ടുപോകും. അത് വളമാണെന്നും പറഞ്ഞ് കൊട്ടിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്.
We have to work harder to do something about this, because Coca Cola and Pepsi and Nestlé, let's not forget Nestlé, is in communities. They're water hunters. They're hunting what's left of the purest water under the ground all over the world, and they're destroying communities in their wake, and they don't care.
In the last few years, we have been seeing a lot of movement on privatization and commercialization of the water sector.
The government of India make a new water policy to privatize our common natural resource. So we fight against this policy, and I start a water literacy movement all over country.
The water right is the main issue in this journey.
और इस मीटिंग में जो बैठे उन्होंने किसी ने भी ये सोचा हो कि ये पानी दूध के भाव बिकेगा.
Before these multinationals, every village have the self-sufficiency, everything we have in our villages. After the multinationals, the seeds, fertilizer, even water, go in the hand of the multinationals. If they can control the resource of life, so they can control the whole thing in our country.
What is also going to happen as a part of this process of commercialization is that the water resources that the people themselves have created are going to be either shut off or are going to be privatized. In the state of Madhya Pradesh, the Asian Development Bank has given a loan for improvement of water supply. One of the conditions of this loan is that public standposts from which the poor people draw their water will be closed down. Today it's the public standposts. Tomorrow it would be the wells and tanks which the people have built themselves. All these would either be privatized or would have to be closed down. So I think there is a very, very important connection that we need to make here. What happens when not just hundreds but thousands and even millions of people find their household economies, their work, their livelihoods collapsing? I think this is the hotbed from where all kinds of social ills or even terrorism, all kinds of civil disorders will spring from.
When it comes to water and people's right to water, we have one common humanity and one common survivor. There is no substitute for clean, fresh water in local endowments of rivers, streams and groundwater. There is no substitute, there is no alternative, and that's why water must be protected everywhere.
Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. We are proof of that.
This band of people in Michigan, which grew from a small band to 1,800 members now, and it's growing. And they're connecting with all the other groups in North America and elsewhere in the world, because that's how this works.
It's not a Democratic issue and it's not a Republican issue. It's a people issue.
The strategy is very simple. Going to the people and talking to them, making them aware of the danger that is ahead. That's all. We have got all these gadgets of modern technology, but there is no technology superior to foot march. They can't stop.
Let it be clear to this company Suez that says we must raise the tariffs, and if we don't, they will leave. If they wish to go, they can. that people will know what they have to do.
The fight against water privatization is an international struggle, and we will fight because there's only one thing to do. Either we fight or we die, and I say we fight.
What if we work in harmony with water? Because don't we want our children and our children's children to share time with all these beautiful life forms? I mean, do we come here to spend most of our time living in non-living boxes? And why are we here?
Large majority of the people don't understand that the future of their children and the future of other species, the future of entire ecosystems is now in the hands of how we humans interfere with how the planet operates as a system. We want to leave a positive legacy for the future generations, not a disaster which they have to fight. I don't know how it's going to happen, but it's got to come from, at some level, from introspection, right? It's got to come ultimately from everybody asking himself and herself what really matters to them, and making a change or taking some action that is consistent with what really matters.
How much we are taking from the nature? Today we are taking everything from the nature, but we are not giving to the nature. So this is the relationship. Your lifestyle can survive with the friendship with nature.
The only way to push for these changes is if everyone gets involved. I think the true solution to water problems are ultimately going to be local. That's the wave of the future.
It is not an issue of lack of knowledge, it is a lack of political will. We have to collectively find the political will to do what needs to be done to save the world's water sources.
And I have no doubt that we will win. 21st century is going to be the century of common people.
In everything that we do, we need to pass a positive message to the children, you know, and with things like water and the moon, the stars, these are all precious gifts that we are given, and I think it's a beautiful story for the kids to hear. What I'm teaching to the kids is that let's stand up and fight. You know, one day you are going to change this, and you are going to make this community a better one.
Wasathakanze sithi phambili sithi umphakathi phambili ngawo phambili mtswalethi community projects. Yeah.
when they came in this area to drill the wells for us, we never thought that we'll get such kind of clean water. Everyone is using it now.
There's so many things that can be done, big and small. This play pump, it's put down where there's groundwater, and the children riding on this, they bring the water up into this huge tank, which then stores the water for the community.
More and more people are looking at rainwater harvesting as a part of the solution, a way to really manage overconsumption of the aquifer. In fact, there are hundreds of homes in the Austin area of the Hill Country that rely on rainwater collection systems for their water supplies. It works very simply. The water is caught on the rooftop and is collected in the gutters and taken to a cistern or a very large storage container. And by balancing the size of the roof with the size of the tank and the number of people in the house, the overall water supply system can manage the ups and downs of dry and wet periods and provide a very reliable water supply.
There is a role for everyone because we need an organized army of water activists in every single congressional district to deal with these problems. The first thing that we need to do is get federal legislation that establishes a federal trust fund to fix our aging infrastructure, 1.5 million miles of it, much of it more than 100 years old. And we should remember, it was community leaders at the turn of the 20th century who had the vision and foresight to fight for the federal dollars to build the pipes that gave us universal service for water. If they did it, we can do it.